All right, now we're joined by Maurice Akech, who's the Acting Executive Director of the National Construction Authority in studio. And it's the second day of the ICOS forum, where we have different stakeholders in the, from across the world, across the continent.
Across the world.
Across the world, coming to discuss issues to do with construction and building. And some of the things you're looking at, for instance, and we talk about across the world, is there's competition from international firms. How is this being dealt with to ensure that we still keep our local firms competitive?
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for inviting me to the studio. And it's a right forum to address these issues. ICOS basically means International Construction Research Conference and Exhibition. This is its day 2. And I want to say that so far it's been a huge success because we have more than 33 countries with over 220 companies exhibiting at the show. With 24 key papers addressing issues of concern in the construction industry being presented. And this is a forum that for us is the culmination of all the events in the construction industry in Kenya. So the issues that we are talking about there are addressing the entire value chain of the construction industry, from materials in terms of manufacturing, supplying financial services, technology, equipment, and so on and so forth. When we talk about the issue of the foreign companies coming to compete with our local companies, I look at that as an opportunity to improve quality and leverage on the prices. Because when you look at construction, we address 3 things. One is quality, the other one is cost, and the other is speed of doing the construction. This can be addressed through competition. Because when you see your competitor doing something better than you, you can only up your game. So let's look at it as a competitive advantage rather than a thing that maybe prohibits or takes away the space from our local participants.
Okay, yes. And we've seen one of the topics you're also discussing at the conference is about the quality of buildings.
Yes.
And we've seen a number of cases, not only in the capital, but also in different parts of the country. Buildings are coming down, or buildings have significant cracks that are a hazard to people living there. One, what has been done to those who have already been caught responsible? Like if you have a building and this building has been found to be defective in one way or another, what has been done?
As I come to address what has been done, let's see why these issues happening. They're happening because of a myriad of challenges. One, it could be maybe somebody undertaking a construction project without involving the right professionals to be able to advise and use the quality, the standard materials required, proper design, and even advice in terms of supervision, and either failure to even use a contractor who is qualified and licensed, or even failure to use a qualified fundi. All this can actually lead to defects that you see. But what has been done is that we have a mandate as National Construction Authority to do quality assurance and compliance checks on ongoing construction works. And this is not just buildings, it's buildings and all projects, including roads, bridges, dams, anything you call construction. Now, what we do when we go to a project that is under construction and we realize there's something that is not complying with the requirements of the law, we have a mandate to suspend. We do suspend these sites, but occasionally, even after suspension, you still find some, I can call it rogue participants, I don't want to call them by name, still going on with the work. So what we have done over time is to actually institute court proceedings for them, and we take them to court, and then the court, the justice system takes its natural course.
So far, have you had any convictions?
We have had cases instituted in court, but in terms of the conclusion, that is still ongoing.
So we don't have any convictions yet we have buildings that have gone down. So is this also an indictment on the judicial system?
I want to say, as a country, we have several cases. The one touching on construction is just one of them. So all these cases have to be looked at together. And you know, judicial system is one arm of government. So all we say is that we work together as a government to be able to achieve all our different mandates. I don't want to say that somebody has not been able to achieve, or they're part of something, of the objective.
I see you're being very politically correct, but nonetheless, the concern here has been, then what is being done to avoid these situations? Because the question is, how are your surveillance checks done? Do you have enough, do you have the capacity to ensure that you've got your surveillance checks being done? Because you're saying there are some rogue people or organizations who will choose to still go on and do their construction despite, you know, having the suspension in place? How do you make sure that this is actually upheld?
Then we have, as an institution, as an authority, we have offices across the country. In fact, we have a presence in 27 different parts of this country. And they sit in counties, but they're not only looking at those counties. For where we do not have an office in a county, one of the 27 will be addressing the neighboring county. So we call them regional offices that we are using to carry out the compliance checks and the quality assurance checks. So in terms of that spread, we have capacity. In terms of our employees or the personnel we have multiple skill sets, and we have all skill sets in the construction industry. We have architects, we have engineers, we have quantity surveyors, we have project managers. In fact, National Construction Authority, I can say, can boast of one of the institutions that has all skill sets of construction professionals employed to undertake the construction industry checks in terms of compliance. So we have capacity. As I've said before, the issue is that if you go to a site today and you've suspended because of lack of one thing or another, because there are about 7 checklists to look at, somebody knows that because you are there today, you may not be there tomorrow. It may even take a week, a month, a year. So this is the advantage some of the people take. But let me tell you, in cases where you've seen buildings collapsing, especially the ones which are under construction, a majority of the times, in fact 99% of the time, those buildings have been suspended by us, and somehow we flagged out something, and maybe somebody ignored, and for some reason, the unfortunate happens, the building collapses. It's so unfortunate that when it collapses, of course, life is lost, property is lost, and someone's investment is lost. If we work together in a way that we do our mandate consciously, everyone who is involved collectively, I can assure you, everything will be good to go, and there will be no collapses.
And so the question here is, what's the balance between, in terms of roles, and where is the meeting point between yourselves and, say, the county governments? Because we see a number of actors in these spaces. Where does your mandate get to, and where does the county pick up, so that we can actually understand?
Good. In fact, there are several pieces of legislation that look at this space of construction industry. We have legislation on issues with materials and standards. We have legislation issues to do with approvals, which is the mandate of the county. And we have a legislation, the National Construction Authority Act, which has the oversight and coordination role of the construction industry. So everyone has its own area of strength and a role to play in this sector. So what we need is that it's like this race which is called, what do you call it, where you give the baton.
Relay.
The relay race, where, and if in a relay, somebody does not complete his part or does not run the full race, it means the other one can only pick half a stick or no stick to pick. That's how I look at it. So it needs to be well coordinated in a way that everyone is able to complete their part of their mandate. So it's not, in my view, that it is, how do you call it, that there is it's confusion. What we need is proper coordination. What we need is proper handover in a way that everyone is able to do their part.
So just briefly,
yeah.
Where would NCA get to and pass the baton to, say, Nairobi County Government, etc.?
What we do, I'll give you a very simple process in a minute. In 1 minute, I'll give you how the process goes. For instance, as a developer, you will look for a professional to do the details for you, plans and everything, then you submit to the county for relevant approval. The county will give you approval, which is permission to develop, having looked at all the areas. Then the next thing you have to do is to look for other regulatory agencies like NEMA, Water Resources Authority, Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, depending on which space you are interacting with. Once all these approvals are obtained, now you bring this particular documentation, including all the licenses you've been given from these agencies, to National Construction Authority to register a project. Because as NCA, we come at the apex, where we now register the projects, and what we check is compliance levels with all the regulatory agencies. So that, and this is checked on the basis of the information and documentation you provide.
So if this documentation was given illegitimately, you cannot detect it?
No, we have a due diligence checks in place, but we also say the person with the responsibility to submit this documentation is the developer. This is the responsibility of the developer. Now, if you know something has not been acquired the right way, and you want to tell NCA, this is my document. NCA goes ahead and gives you the compliance certificate, which is what we issue. What does that mean? If things go wrong, and if things were to be traced backwards, who will be culpable? That question can leave for the wananchi to answer.
Note. No, but so the question is, if, for example, at the county level, somebody, God forbid, bribes someone and they get a document illegitimately, and it will come all the way to you, and you will give a certificate. It has your seal of approval. So who's going to be held responsible for that? It's the developer, or will it be the person at the county, or yourselves?
All of us. All of us, because everyone has a duty to check that what they have is legitimate, has been duly acquired, and is able to meet the legal requirements.
And so who should actually then, face the law? Is it all of you once again?
I think so, because everyone who is culpable, I like using examples. In a chain, nyororo, it is only as strong as the weakest part, isn't it? So if you're not able to pluck out that weak part, it means the nyororo will go as we think it is strong, but it's weak because there's a part that has not done the right thing. That's how I call it. So at the end of the day, you cannot say, I'm not part of the chain because I didn't participate. All of us participated, and everyone should be actually held accountable for whatever it is. What I like is that, now, as much as it is a collective responsibility, but there's also a singular responsibility as far as that part goes. So at the beginning, you look at the entire chain, but now when you narrow down, you see within this chain, who was accountable for whatever sins that were done, if any.
So again, in the example I've given, when we go to court and God forbid people died, who's meant to, so all of you have to be taken to court and charged?
At the beginning, yes, at the beginning. All of us go to court.
Until you get the singular.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. One other thing that has been happening is in regards to buildings on riparian land. Where are we with that? At times it seems that there's a lot of energy around that space, then suddenly it goes down, then there's some you hear, it's meant to be like, for instance, CFA apartments. We had it's meant to be demolished. Shortly we had no. So the question is, the initial report, where was it from? What is credibility? Where are we with this one? And where are we with it, with the whole demolition of land on, buildings on riparian land?
Riparian.
And road reserves as well.
Again, let me say this. It is the ultimate responsibility of the person coming up with a project to ensure that, one, the land that the project is going to be put has been properly acquired and has no encumbrances and has nothing to do with other, does not border in injuring the law. What do I mean by this? Riparian land is a natural space, and is space that is already anchored in and defined in law. So when you're doing, at the point of approval at the design, that needs to be checked. Of course, you put in an aspect that in case, God forbid, somebody bribes someone and they still go ahead and make the approval. When it is traced back and it's found that it was not done correctly, I can assure you that building will be termed to have been put on the wrong place. And when something is in the wrong place, what do? Do you remove the wrong place, or do you remove the wrong thing?
It depends who you're asking. If you ask for Itito, he might tell you something different, but that's besides the point.
Yes. So what I wanted to say is this. With the aspect of the particular building you've mentioned, CFA Apartments,
yes,
which is bordering the Nairobi Dam on the Ngong River, which is one of the longest rivers in Nairobi. I think it's now at the stage of due diligence in terms of confirming all those documentations. And after that process is complete, now we'll go ahead to the next stage. Yeah.
So, but there was initially a directive to ask the tenants to even move out.
Yes.
What was this based on? Because this, I know it is not you who issued it, but exactly, yeah. Because that may be the answer. So I'm trying to preempt. I'm trying to preempt. But why would we have that kind of, is it that we don't have clear-cut, lines in terms of communication in the government circles to say that today we are saying this should be demolished. Tomorrow we say we're not too sure, we need to check. Why would we have this kind of confusion? At least it's simply confusion.
Dan, that's a very difficult question. And as NCA, let me say this. Sometimes when you want to undertake a task and you've already given a communication. There's nothing wrong with reflecting back and saying, this decision I've made, is it the right one? Have I checked everything else? And that's where I think the stage, I don't want to comment authoritatively because I'm not at the center stage of this. But all I want to say is that it is at that stage where now they are doing what we call due diligence check on all the documentation. And once the process is complete, I'm sure necessary steps will follow.
Now, just to go back to what you mentioned, like in the case where we said, again, God forbid, someone bribed along the way and got legitimately, then we trace it back and find that this was actually put on a place it shouldn't have been, and so we have to remove that building. Who compensates? Is it not to be compensated, first of all? Or are we saying the developer excuse me, colluded with the person who they bribed, and so they both suffer?
The cost of that, in my view, the cost of that making things right is the bribery or the compromise that somebody does, if it happens, as you say, God forbid. That's the cost. If it was a simple bribery, it was that cheap. If it was an expensive bribery, it's that expensive. So as you lose your property, as you lose your investment, what I look at is that the cost of losing that investment is what you put as a seed of whatever you called it, investment, in quotes, to secure your space. So all I urge all of us is that let's do the right thing. Let's soul search. Let's ensure that our conscience is clear and everything will just be okay. Because today, I may come and, God forbid, you are the one sitting in position of influence. I come and say, Dan, I want to do this. You say, fine, go ahead. Tomorrow, Dan is not there, but the law has not changed. So I should follow the law, not Dan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me again. And so we've heard that we are still expecting a number of other demolitions to be coming. How are we choosing where to start and where not to start? Because sometimes there's been a concern that some of these properties are owned by influential people, so they're not being touched yet. So what is the criteria of choosing where to demolish and where to wait?
I want to be a bit theological on this one. We are all aware that God first created the earth, plus all the natural resources, including the rivers, oceans, and all water bodies, mountains and valleys. That is given, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, when we came as human beings, we found these things in existence. Now, the law also came and defined that in these areas, this should be done and this should not be done. So what are we saying? Over time, we have been using spaces that actually do not belong to us. They belong to those natural bodies. For instance, water, you see a river on a water here today, water on a river here today, that water will end up in Indian Ocean, whether you block it or not. Before it ends up, either it will cause flooding, it will cause havoc, but at the end of the day, it will be evacuated to the natural water body. So all we are saying is that this where to start and where not to start has no, in my view, has no, what do you call it? Has no steps to follow or priority where to begin. What's happening is to prepare a report that defines what is on Riparian, what is not, and from that report we can look at whether bringing down the building is what needs to be done or working around it. We look at it in a sustainable way, because sometimes there's what we call economic loss, there's what we call loss of investment, there's what we call the human aspect of it, social, political, and economic. So sustainability must also be looked at, and that's why you see there must be a report to justify where we are going and what is going to be done.
So right now, for the ones that have already been demolished, what was the criteria? What informed? Let's begin with, let's go to UK. Let's then go to South End. Let's go to Taj.
Well, again, those are answers that are not with me, Dan. And this is, for me, a government initiative, and it was meant to address certain, to clear certain areas. Like, for instance, flooding has been an issue in this country, and we're all aware about it. And there are some areas that were critically on the path of the waterway. So that had to be cleared so that we don't suffer the havoc of flood, especially in Nairobi. Then there are areas which are being touched because of maybe on road reserve or something, and Riparian and so on and so forth. But I have no, as I say, it is not my area of competence to address to the Mwananchi. So I would be lying if I say I can give you an authoritative answer.
Okay, and now let's think about it from the Mwananchi you've mentioned. If, say, I'm going to, to become a tenant in a certain building, how would I know that it is legitimate, that I'm not going to settle? And it's quite an expensive affair to move into a house. You're told nowadays people will be asking for 2 months rent and a month's deposit. So it's 3 times of what you're meant to be paying.
Yeah.
So if, say, I'm going to a place, let's use hypothetically, of 20,000 shillings, I need to pay 60,000 and you've not added the moving costs and the likes. How then would I know? Is there a way that I can access information like that?
Very good. And this is not too much to ask for a common Mwananchi whenever they want to move into a house, whether it's new or existing. Simple items to ask is documentation. One, find out from the landlord or the house owner that I want to see occupation certificate of your building. Your building has been cleared for occupation. That is the point number one. That's actually the output of all construction processes. Regardless of what you need to get to that level, the output that is given by the county government is occupation certificate. The moment that is given, it means everything has been cleared. That's number one. The other thing you can ask for, if you want to go deeper, is ask the landlord, can I see some of the documentation for the building, like the drawings? I want to see the architectural designs, the structural designs, who was involved, and so on and so forth. You can even go deeper and say, which were the teams, and maybe go and discuss with them. Of course, that will be like now digging too much, but it's not too much to ask for me, because the way I look at things is that if you are putting your investment somewhere and you're actually putting your life on the line, one of the things you need to ask for is that, how safe am I in this building? By asking for those documents, you can be trying to eliminate the gray areas that may make that building fall on you when you're
But like, for instance,
Yeah.
I am not trained in anything to do with engineering.
Yes.
And if you came and gave me a set of drawings,
Yeah,
I mean,
I knew that was coming.
exactly, how would I then know, inyuma nimbaya, let me move to another one?
Very good question. If those drawings are available, in my view, he cannot get them from anywhere. He can only get them on the basis of the building he did. The only thing that may be wrong or may be a gap, which your question is valid, is that how do I ensure that these drawings have been given is a match to this particular building? That's given. But many a times the landlord with a drawing most likely will have followed due process, because those drawings will have been approved. And the aspect I talked of supervision. If you knew there was somebody who supervised that, you can ask, I want to know who supervised, because the reason why some of us shy away is that the landlord will tell you, kama utaki nyumba yangu, enda utafuta ingine. We need to get out of that. You are there to invest, and it's because of me that you have invested in your building. So if you're going to chase me away, it means there's something you're hiding. If you're genuine, you will show me everything.
And is there no platform, and maybe this might lead to the question of, is NCA digitizing its records? Because where I can quickly say, for example, it may be easier, but it's a good example, like for vehicles. If I'm going to buy a certain vehicle,
yes.
I'll just go online on the eCitizen or
yes.
the NTSA app, and I key in the details, and I can actually see Maurice Akech does not own this car, but he's purporting to own it. Is there anything like that that can be put in place to make it easier? Because that becomes a technical process and a bit of a tedious one for me to ask for documents, because sometimes think about the people who have been told to move out of CIFA. If that was to go through, you've got a week to move, and you have to do all these things. Is there anything like that is in the plans possibly? Oh
yes, Dan. What's happening, in fact, very good question, because it's going to help Mwananchi know how far we've gone as an authority. National Construction Authority has a mandate to register projects, all construction projects happening across the country. Now, for the last 2 years, we've gone online. We've automated our processes. So what happens today is that any developer who is planning to do a construction would bring their project for registration. When they bring it, it's done online at the comfort of their offices or their desk or their home. As long as they have access to internet, they'll upload all the documents, they'll push it into the system, It will come to us, we'll evaluate, and what we check is very simple. You have a registered contractor? Yes. You have a qualified architect? Yes. You have a qualified engineer? Yes. A quantity surveyor? Yes. You have a contract in place? Yes. And all these people have to accept, all these professionals have to accept without the landlord or the developer influencing them, because the acceptance channel is actually remotely accessed outside the eye of the land. So you will not know. You cannot come and say, Dan, I've used your name, so please accept for me. It will actually go through the loop where your details are being accessed from your various professional body that regulates you. Like for architects, we get reference contact details from the architects body, the Board of Registration of Architects and Quantity Surveyors. From engineers, we get from Engineers Board of Kenya. So you have no way to influence that as a developer. So it will be genuine. So what that means is that once it is done online and you are approved and you given your compliance certificate, you can actually go online and check projects that have been registered, and genuinely so. So at the end of the day, you can easily just check and say, though sometimes the developer is not the landlord, sometimes it's bought afterwards, but there's a way you can trace and say, this particular property followed due process and registered by NCA, because by the time it's registered by NCA, it means it has followed all the other due process, and now it is good to go.
Okay,
yeah.
And in closing, very briefly, Mr. Engineer Akech, what are we looking to achieve from the ICOS that is closest tomorrow, the conference?
Yes, closing tomorrow.
Closing tomorrow. What are what do we hope to be the take-home from there that can actually be implemented?
Wow. Then, before it ends, you also need to come, but I'm going to tell you what the takeaway is going to be.
Very briefly, yes.
One of the things we're going to take away is some of the various innovative products that have been recently developed, and they are now being showcased at the show, all the way from building materials, construction materials for all categories of construction, roads, power lines, everything is there. We have heavy machinery and equipment, sophisticated. Some of them you can even track to the minute in terms of usability, productivity, and so on and so forth. And inside the conference presentations, we have papers that are actually addressing issues with the reasons why buildings collapse, issues deal with the Big Four agenda, and many other areas that we are talking about. So there is so much that you can come. But tomorrow is something we've added, where we are going to visit actually some of the key flagship projects that are ongoing in the country, for the delegates to be able to expose themselves to some of the good projects we have around as a government. Especially
in line, like you said, like in line with the Big Four agenda,
yes,
because affordable housing is under, there's a significant part you have to play in this.
Correct.
Thank you very much, Engineer Maurice Akech, the acting ED, that's the Executive Director of the National Construction Authority, giving us some insight on some of the issues around the built environment, the building and construction sector, and the different issues around that. It's a conversation that could have gone on and on, but we shall have to stop it there. But Engineer, we should get an opportunity to get a further conversation so we can dig deeper into these things.